Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Spring in Bear Country webinar. My name is Lindsay, and I'm a park interpreter in Birds Hill Provincial Park, located on Treaty 1 territory, homeland of the Anishinaabe and the Métis Nation, whose peoples are deeply connected with the plants and animals of this land. Tonight, we are learning about one of my most favorite animals, bears. So tonight we're going to be learning how you can keep yourself, your property, and ultimately the bears safe in bear country. So we're going to start off tonight with a poll question. So there we have our first poll question. You can choose, have you ever seen a bear in the wild in Manitoba? Yes or no? So keep in mind, we're looking for any type of bear you've seen in Manitoba in the wild. So not in the zoo, not in, some other type of enclosed location, but in the wild in Manitoba. And we'll share those results with you in just a moment. All right, so looks like we have our results. Quite a few of you have seen a bear in Manitoba. That's awesome, very exciting. A few of you haven't, and for some of you, that might be okay not to have seen a bear in the wild. I know for some people, that's a bit of a nerve-wracking situation. All right, well, we're gonna find out a little more about our bears, and we actually have 3 different types of them in the province. So we're gonna get rid of that poll question and move on here. So our 3 types of bears that we see in Manitoba are our black bears. These are the most common bears seen in the province. We see them throughout Manitoba. We also see polar bears up north in Churchill, Manitoba, and along the Hudson Bay coastline. And finally, the newest bear on the Manitoba block are our grizzly bears. And this might surprise some of you to hear, but yes, we do actually have grizzlies in Manitoba. These are most likely barren ground grizzlies that have migrated south from Nunavut. But don't worry, they have only been sighted in northern parts of the province in Wapusk National Park along the Hudson Bay coastline. Every year since about 2008, there has been at least 1 confirmed sighting of this type of bear, and only in Wapusk caught on trail camera footage. Now, little is known about these animals. Where do they overwinter? Are they mating or reproducing in the park? And how many individuals are there? These are all questions that scientists are still working to answer. But what is known about these bears is that they are likely coming down into Manitoba for a specific reason, and that has to do with climate change. So warming temperatures, melting sea ice, and changes in plant growth are creating new food sources and habitat opportunities for these bears. So this brings us to our next poll question of the evening. What type of bears have you seen in Manitoba? So your choices are black bears, polar bears, or grizzly bears. So again, what type of bears have you seen in the wild in our province? And we'll share those results with you in a moment. Now I can see already we have a few people that have seen polar bears in Manitoba, and I have to say I'm very jealous. I have visited Churchill. We searched for about 2 weeks for polar bears and never saw a single one. So I'm very jealous of those of you that have seen a polar bear in the wild in Manitoba. And a lot of you have seen black bears. And that's exactly what I figured, because black bears are the most common species that we see here. All right, we're gonna clear that poll question and move on to finding out a little bit more about our black bears. So even though they are called a black bear, they may not always be black in color. So they may actually be brownish. They might be cinnamon or a red color. They might be blonde. A little more rare is the blue phase. And even on occasion, a white bear, not albino, but a white bear is born to a black female black bear. So these are all the different color phases that you can find black bears in. Regardless of what color their fur looks like, they are still a black bear. And we're going to do a little comparison between our black bears and grizzly bears so that you can see the difference. So the first real noticeable difference between these 2 species is that our grizzly bears have a large shoulder hump, which black bears do not have. They have a little bit of a raise over their shoulders, but not the distinguishable hump that grizzlies have. Black bears also have a longer, flatter face. You can see that in their profile, whereas the grizzlies have a shorter, rounder face, and their heads are actually quite a bit larger. Black bears' claws are shorter than grizzlies, and their footprints are fairly similar in size, although the black bear paw prints are a little bit smaller. So throughout this evening, as we continue learning about our bears, if I do say the word bear, I'm referring to black bears, not grizzlies, not polar bears. They're two very different species. So tonight we're just really going to be focusing on our black bears. So to continue learning a bit more about them, the adult males can weigh anywhere from 130 to about 660 pounds, whereas adult females only weigh between 90 and 175 pounds. The largest black bear on record in Manitoba weighed over 880 pounds. He was a big boy. Now, both the adult males and females range from 50 to 75 inches in length, and their height when they're standing on all fours is about 3 feet, but when they're up on 2 legs, they can reach heights of 5 to 7 feet. Now, our black bear population in Manitoba is very healthy and stable at about 35,000 animals. And you can see most of Manitoba is home to black bears, even as far north as the Churchill and Wapusk National Park areas. So this brings us to poll question number 3. So this question is, where in Manitoba have you ever seen a black bear in the wild? And we've broken this up into different regions of the province. So we have the Interlake Central region, the Eastern, the Southeast, the Southwest, Parkland, which is our Riding Mountain, Duck Mountains, Porcupine Hills, and the Northern region. So where in Manitoba have you seen black bears? And you can choose all that apply. If you've seen black bears in multiple locations, you can choose all the different regions of where you've seen them. And we'll share these results with you in just a moment. Right now, I can see that there's a lot coming in for the Eastern region, quite a few for the Parkland and the Interlake. All right, and there are our results. So it looks like the highest number of bears seen amongst our viewers today is from the Eastern region, and that's no surprise, out in the Whiteshell, Lac du Bonny, Nopaming areas. And then the next highest is in the Parkland, the Riding Mountain, Duck Mountain, Porcupine Hills area. Interlake Central also sees a large number of bears, mostly out at Grand Beach, but we do also see them here in Birds Hill and in Hecla. All right, so we're gonna move on from that poll question. And this kind of gives you a little bit of a better breakdown of where exactly we see bears in Manitoba. So the Duck Mountains and Riding Mountain area represented on this map with the 2 yellow stars. So that's in our Parkland region of Manitoba. That is where we see the highest density of black bears in the province. But interestingly, the highest human bear conflict areas that we see in Manitoba is actually Grand Beach and the Steinbach area. It used to be more so out around the Whiteshell, but it actually changed over to the Steinbach area about 5 or 6 years ago when the increase of cornfields to feed the hog industry really increased. And so those are the 2 parts of the province where we see the most human bear conflict arising in the province. So this brings us to the idea that if you go camping or you spend any time in the outdoors of Manitoba, or if you live in rural areas, you really have to consider that you are in bear country and you need to know how to protect yourself, your property, and ultimately the bears. So probably the biggest question that we hear when we talk about bears is, what do I do if I meet a bear? And really the answers to that are quite simple. So the first thing is you need to stop, remain calm, and assess the situation. Your behavior is really going to be based on what the bear is doing. So if you come across a bear that is really unaware of you, what you want to do is keep calm, don't make any noise or try to draw attention to yourself, and just leave the area as quietly as you can, going back the way you came from. You also want to keep an eye on the bear, so don't turn around where you can't see the animal, but just back away and keep an eye on the bear so that you can monitor what its behavior is doing and make sure that it isn't aware of you. If, however, the bear is aware of you, it may become defensive towards its territory. If it has cubs with it, or if it's in the middle of eating, it could become a bit on the defensive side. So in this case, the best thing to do is, again, remain calm and gather together as a group. If you have young children with you or small animals, small dogs, pick them up. And if you have a larger dog, pull them in so that they're close to you. Never let your dog run out to try and scare the bear or chase the bear. That could actually end in the bear being drawn in closer to you. Another thing you want to do is raise your arms. If you have a backpack, you can raise your backpack or your jacket up above your head. Just try to make yourself look as large as you are. You want to slowly back away from the animal, giving it lots of space. And as odd as this sounds, you actually want to talk to the bear in a calm, low voice so that the bear can hear you backing away from him. This will help the bear to know that you are a human, not some other type of animal, and it'll be able to hear your voice getting further away. So that'll help the bear to know that it's in a safe spot. A good rule of thumb is to actually hold out your arm in front of you, and you can actually try this at home if you want. Extend your arm in front of you, hold up a thumb, and close one eye. If you can see the animal, and this goes for any type of wildlife, if you can see the animal around the edges of your thumb, you know that you are too close and you need to back away. Only when you cannot see the animal around your thumb is when you know that you're a safe enough distance from that animal. So that's what we call our rule of thumb. Now, in rare cases, if a defensive bear makes contact with you and does start to attack, your best bet is to play dead. Lay on your stomach with your legs spread apart, lock your fingers behind the back of your neck for protection, and try not to cry out or make any noise. If you have a backpack on, keep this on you as it can add protection to your body. When the bear feels you are no longer a threat, it will likely leave you alone. But don't move until you are sure that the bear has left the area, or it may come back. Now, this is very rare behavior for black bears in Manitoba. And even rarer behavior is a predatory bear. So this is one that is considers a person to be potential prey. Its approach will be deliberate and silent. But again, this is the most dangerous type of bear in the province, but the least common of what we ever see in Manitoba. So the best thing to do if you ever come across a predatory bear is to group together and try to convince the bear that you are a bigger threat than it. So you want to stand your ground, make direct eye contact, shout, make yourself look big, wave your arms, stomp your feet, whatever you can do to show the bear that you are not something it wants to really be messing with. Now, if you have bear spray, which we do recommend you carry, this is the time to use it. But keep in mind that bear spray range is only about 30 feet. So it really is meant for close contact. Now, if this type of bear does attack, you need to fight back. Again, this is the least common occurrence in Manitoba, but one that you should still be prepared for. So remember to make lots of noise when you are in bear country. Most bears don't want to be around people. They're actually more scared of us than we are of them. So the more noise you can make, the better it is to let the bear know that you are there. The most typical type of bear encounter is one where the human doesn't even know that the bear is in the area. Some other tips that you can follow, and this works for all types of wildlife, is to travel in groups, and not listen to music on headphones or earbuds while you're out in the forest. This really limits your ability to hear and be aware of your surroundings. And you need to always keep your dogs on a leash. I can't stress this one enough. Off-leash dogs actually have the ability of drawing wildlife in closer to you, whether it's a bear, a skunk, even a raccoon. So you always want to be keeping your dog on a leash for their protection and for yours. So while it's important to know how to protect ourselves if we see a bear, it's also important to know how to protect the bear from coming into areas where humans are in the first place. So this is not always an easy thing if you live in rural areas or have a cottage or a campsite in bear country, but there are simple steps that we can take to avoid interactions with bears. We really need to remember that it's our responsibility as citizens of the outdoors to protect black bears by removing attractants that can cause them to become problem wildlife. It's not up to the bear to do this, it's up to us. So you might be thinking to yourself, what could be attracting a bear into my area? And what would a bear be attracted to? Well, just about anything. They have an unbelievable sense of smell. Now you might think that you have a good sense of smell, and in some cases that might be true. However, not as good as animals do. So we all know that bloodhounds are a dog very well known for their sense of smell, and a bloodhound sense of smell is about 300 times better than the average humans. But a black bear's sense of smell is 7 times better than the bloodhound. So if you can do the math, that means the bear's sense of smell is 2,100 times better than a human's sense of smell. And this means that the bear can smell things that we absolutely can't. Now, their sense of smell is what really drives their behavior. They can smell potential food sources up to 8 kilometers away. This means they can smell human food and garbage, even things that are inside plastic bags or Rubbermaid containers or a cooler. Anything that has a scent, even if it is inside your tent or your trailer, they can smell that. So this is not what bears should be eating, but their search for food can often get them into a bit of trouble. So what should bears be eating? Well, black bears are omnivores, meaning that they eat both meat and vegetation, and they're really not picky eaters at all. So here's a bit of a breakdown of what their diet looks like. And what might surprise you is that the largest part of their diet is actually made up of vegetation, things like berries, nuts, and plants. The second largest part of their diet is called carrion. So that's dead animals. And bears are really kind of like the cleanup crew in the forest, eating winter-killed deer and any other expired animals that they find. Insects make up about 7% of their diet, particularly anthills, beehives, and beetles. Bears love digging into anthills and rolling over dead logs or stones, looking for insects hiding underneath. And the smallest part of a bear's diet is actually made up of small mammals that they hunt for themselves. Now, it takes a lot of energy for a large bear to move around and hunt for their own food, which is one of the reasons why they tend to go after food sources that are more stationary and don't move. Bears are also what we consider opportunistic eaters, so they will really eat whatever opportunity presents itself. Now, what they eat really does affect their scat or their droppings. So in the springtime, they're eating a lot of dry vegetation, and as aspen trees are coming into bloom, they love to eat the aspen catkins. In early summer, their scat is often a greenish color with the large amounts of fresh vegetation that they're consuming. And throughout the summer and fall months, bear scat varies depending on what fruit is in season and what they have access to. It's very easily identifiable by the large amounts of seeds in it. So seeds that travel through a bear's digestive system and come out the other end are actually really important for seed dispersal and helping plants to be able to grow in different areas. Now, during the wintertime, bears go into a state of hibernation called torpor, where they don't eat, they don't drink, and they do not urinate or defecate. So they basically don't go to the bathroom that entire time that they're hibernating. They breathe about once every 30 seconds, and their heart rate drops to about 15 beats per minute. And this is my favorite bear fact. This is where sometimes I wish I was a bear. They use up to about 4,000 calories a day just by sleeping. I really wish I could do that. Now, when bears do wake up in the springtime, they are slow and groggy. So this is also why I think I sometimes feel like a bear. Now, it can take them up to 3 weeks from the time that they do wake up for their metabolism to adjust back to their normal summer levels. And when they are emerging, adult males and juveniles are the first to emerge from the dens, followed by females and females with cubs. Now, black bears can give birth to a litter of 1 to 4 cubs in the late spring, in February, depending on the health of the female. And the cubs stay with their mother for the first 18 months of their life until she is ready to mate again in the late spring. The male does not have any involvement in raising the cubs at all. Now, mother bears are fiercely protective of their cubs and will teach them to climb trees as a quick escape from predators such as wolves. Black bears are excellent tree climbers. Now, cubs spend a lot of their time playing and learning how to be a bear, and ideally, this should include a healthy dose of fear from humans and not associating humans with food sources. So as summer turns into fall, bears go into a state called hyperphagia, which is the scientific term for high food intake. Now, normally a black bear consumes about 5,000 calories each day to meet their energy requirements. However, during hyperphagia, a black bear needs to consume about 25,000 calories every day to build up those fat reserves in order to make it through hibernation and for a small period of time in the spring when they wake up from hibernating. So essentially, they only have about 7 months to eat enough food to survive for 12 months. Now, the necessity for, or the energy that it takes to build up these fat reserves for the winter relates to about 11 pounds of acorns and about 80 pounds of wild fruit. Now, in human terms, this equals about 8 large cheese pizzas, 33 Big Macs, or 8 pounds of sunflower seeds. So I don't know if there's anybody out there that could eat 33 Big Macs every day for 3 to 4 months, but I think it might make you a little on the sick side if you did try. Whereas for bears, that is the equivalent of what they're eating every single day just to make it through the winter. So their necessity to find enough food can lead bears to being attracted to human food and garbage. When a bear learns to associate human food and garbage with an easy food source, they become habituated. So habituated bears become problem wildlife, and it creates conflict between humans and bears. Problem wildlife may have to be relocated or destroyed, which we really want to avoid. Obviously, we don't want to have to euthanize our bears, but if they are causing a threat to human lives or property, Manitoba conservation officers have no other option but to dispatch these animals. Now, you might be thinking, why can't the bear just be relocated rather than euthanized? Well, relocating bears is not as simple as it sounds. Black bears have large territories, upwards of 207 square kilometers, that's about 80 square miles, and they can travel great distances. So oftentimes, relocating them just moves them from one part of their territory into another part of it. But the biggest problem with relocation is it removes the bear, but it doesn't remove the bad habit that the bear has developed. So they are still considered habituated towards humans, and they take this habit with them no matter where they get moved to. So essentially, relocating a bear just makes the habituated bear someone else's problem to have to deal with. So how do we avoid habituating bears and putting them at risk? Well, this is actually quite simple, by practicing prevention. So removing the attractants that bears are attracted to will actually remove the bear in the first place. And this can also be helpful with a lot of other creatures such as skunks, raccoons, squirrels, and deer. So the tips we're going to go over this evening are tips you can practice at your home, your cottage, and your campsites. So the first one we're going to take a look at are coolers and food storage containers. By far, these are one of the easiest things that bears are attracted to because they're full of all kinds of good smells. Even if a cooler or a food storage container is empty, it still is going to have odors inside of those plastic or metal materials that the bear can still smell. So the best thing to really do with these types of items is to keep them inside your vehicle when they're not in use. So outside of enjoying your meals while you're out camping or at the cottage, the best place to store them is in your vehicle, never inside your tent. And even if you have a trailer, if it's not a hard-sided trailer, you might want to consider keeping your food items inside your vehicle because a soft-sided trailer, a bear can very easily get into if they really want to. So this is especially important when you're not at your site, if you're away for the daytime or at nighttime. Inside your vehicle with the windows up is the best place to be keeping your food items. If you're in backcountry areas, the best location for food items as well as cooking utensils or anything that might have a scent to it, such as toiletry items, is inside a bear-proof container, and some backcountry campsites even have backcountry containers that are on site where you can store your food items that bears can't get into them. Now, the next item that bears are particularly drawn to are barbecues, and this might be a barbecue at your house or at your cottage, or even a little portable barbecue that you bring out camping with you. So of course, these are going to be splattered in grease and maybe even bits of food. It's really important to clean these on a regular basis, and don't forget to clean out the grease trap. And when a barbecue is not being used, really the best place to keep it is in a locked area, such as a garage or a shed. If you just keep your barbecue on your patio, like the one shown here, very easy for a bear to be drawn to it. If you have a little portable barbecue that you bring out camping with you, inside your vehicle is the best place to keep it when it's not in use. Cook stoves kind of fall into the same category, and I know it's super easy to just leave the cook stove sitting on the picnic table when you're out camping. But again, the best thing to do with these is to clean them when you're done using them and to store them inside your vehicle when they're not in use, as opposed to just leaving them on the picnic table for the whole weekend. The smells that are on these stoves can just draw a bear right in. Now, dealing with dishwater is always a bit of a tricky thing when you're out camping. If you're in a campground or a cottage area, the best thing to do with your dishwater is to dispose of it in a gray water holding tank if one is available at the site. If not, then down a toilet or down an outhouse is the best location. If you're in a backcountry camping area, you can try this method like shown in the photo where they're using a strainer to strain out any bits of food particles, and then that can be dumped into a garbage bag and packed out with them. The other option for backcountry camping is if you're washing your dishes in a river or a lake and using a biodegradable soap, you always want to wash your dishes about 100 meters downstream from where you are camping. That way, any odors that are in the water are going to flow down away from your campsite and hopefully not draw a bear in. Now, garbage and recycle bins. Again, these are full of all kinds of good smells, even when they're empty. So if you live in an area where bears are prone to being spotted in communities or rural areas, you always want to put your garbage and recycling out the day of collection. Really try not to leave those bins out all week long. And when they're not in use, the best place to keep them is inside your garage or in a shed. And it's a good idea to give them a bit of a washout every so often, every few months. Or if something has leaked into the bottom of them, as soon as you can possibly clean them out with a bit of a bleach solution, or if you want to be a little more environmentally friendly, even a vinegar solution will work well. And if you are camping, the best thing to do with garbage is to dispose of it in bear-proof or animal-resistant containers as soon as you've collected it. So when I was camping as a kid, we used to do this after every meal. It was either my job or my brother's job to go at the end of the meal with the bag of garbage and walk it down to the enclosure and dispose of it. Really important not to just allow garbage or recyclables to collect on your campsite during your stay. And dispose of it, say at the end of your stay. You really want to be disposing of it quite regularly so that critters are not getting into it. Now, compost bins are a bit of a tricky thing. We often get asked why we don't have compost available in our campgrounds in Manitoba parks. And the reason for that really is because it's a real challenge with wildlife. And so you can see here, this bear is just going right to town on this compost bin. That's a great feast for him. But if you do have a compost and you are living in bear country, somewhere where you know bears are prone to be, some really good composting tips is to keep your compost covered with dried leaves or dried grass. And something you can do that's super easy is in the fall time, rather than disposing of your dried, raked up leaves, just keep them in a bag on your property. And as the spring and summer months go on, then you have a collection of dried leaves to add into your compost throughout that spring and summer seasons. So you can add dried leaves and grass to your compost. Mixing your compost regularly and watering it will also help to reduce the odors, and it'll help the materials to break down a lot faster. Another option is you can actually dig your compostable items directly into your garden, 1 to 2 feet below the surface level, and cover them up. Again, breaking them down and watering them does help those materials to break down a lot faster. And always avoid putting dairy products, meat, or fish into compost bins. Those items are really not recommended for most composts, and those will definitely attract bears to the area. Another option you have is installing an electric fence around a compost or a garden area. Now for fruit trees, berry bushes, and gardens, again, this can be just an inviting feast for a bear. So it's always important to pick ripened fruit as it's ready, and really try not to let fruit just lay on the ground and decompose that way. In some areas of Manitoba, there's groups that will come out, volunteer groups that will come and actually help pick that ripened fruit from your property. I know there's one group that has run in the past called Fruit Share, and they will help not only pick fruit, but then donate it to local community groups that need it. And this is a great way of removing that produce from your property and avoiding bears being attracted to it. Now, for any of our four-legged friends out there, of course, it's important to feed them too when you're out camping or at the cottage, but really important to try not to feed them outdoors if at all possible. Now for camping, this can be a little trickier. You never want to feed your pets inside your tent. So a really good trick for this is if you get a large piece of carpeting or a mat that you can put down under their dishes. It just helps to collect any bits of food that might spill out onto the ground, and then you can clean up those bits of food particles and that mat and store them away in your vehicle when they're not in use. And don't leave pet food in the dish all day long for your pet to graze on. That will definitely attract bears as well as squirrels and all kinds of other critters to your site. Pet food is often high in calories and different nutrients that really draws wildlife in. So it's important to only feed your pet when they're actually going to eat and not leave food out during the day or overnight that could attract other critters. And probably the most sought after item by bears when it comes to human attractants are bird feeders. If you've ever seen a bear go after a bird feeder, it can be quite humorous. Bears are actually very agile, very, I don't even know what to call this one. He just makes me laugh every time I see him. But this does become a serious issue when we do have bird feeders out and bears are active. Bears love to go after bird seed, and they're smart enough to realize that when the bird feeder is empty, humans will often come and refill the bird feeder, which means the bear is just going to come back again and again and again, and it's just an open buffet for him when those bird feeders are full of seed. And that goes for any type of bird seed, whether it's suet or peanuts or any types of seeds that you put out. The bears absolutely love it. So really try to discourage putting out bird feeders during the summer months when bears are active. If you absolutely must feed the birds, best time to do it is during the winter months. So we typically say from November till March. When bears are hibernating, but it's also really important to take note of the seasons. This year we've had an exceptionally early spring. Bears were starting to wake up and come out of their dens the first week of March already. So that's about a month earlier than most years. And so it's really important to take down those bird feeders as soon as bears are awake and moving around. But also important to clean up any bird seed that is left over on the ground that bears as well as other rodents might be attracted to. Now, if you do put up bird feeders, again, it's important to know that bears will most likely find a way to get into them. But it's also important to know that birds really don't need to be fed during the summer months. They're perfectly capable of finding all the seed that they need to survive and all the natural food sources they need. So feeding birds also conditions them to become habituated. So bird feeders kind of become a bit of a double negative with wildlife in the summer months. And now this is a plea for anybody who visits Birds Hill Park or any other parks where you might be tempted to put out bird feeders. Please, 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 please do not feed the birds in our parks. We love to see wildlife. It's such a joy to see them in their natural habitats. However, putting out bird feeders, particularly in parks, creates a lot of problems. Not only does it habituate the birds and the other animals, it can often create a lot of garbage, a lot of pollution. Bird feeders that are put out in parks are often not maintained, so they're often not refilled on a regular basis, which can leave birds kind of looking for that food source that is suddenly not available to them anymore. And bird feeders like this are often not cleaned. And so that can also pose a bit of a threat to birds because we don't want them to get sick off of bacteria or the buildup of germs in these types of feeders. So if you really want to feed the birds, please do it on your own property, not in parks. And that helps the birds, it helps the bears, and really it helps everybody that enjoys our parks and natural spaces. Now, last but certainly not least, one of the most important things to never ever do with bears is to intentionally feed them or lure them. This will most definitely cause bears to become habituated and ultimately lead the bear to becoming problem wildlife and most likely having to be destroyed. Bears are wild animals, not pets, and we need to really respect them for the wild animals that they are and practice prevention and protection of them. So please remember that it is our responsibility as citizens of the outdoors to protect black bears by removing attractants that can cause them to become problem wildlife. I hope you enjoyed learning about bears tonight. As I said, they're one of my most favorite animals to learn more about. And so if you would like to continue learning more about bears and ways to protect yourself and your property and the bears, you can visit Manitoba Wildlife Smart. We'll leave this page up for a little bit, so if you want to write down that website address, you can. They've got some great information there on being bear smart and other wildlife smart brochures that you can learn from. And there's also our tip line, turn-in poachers and reporting forest fires. That number can also be contacted for any wildlife issues in Manitoba. So thank you so much for joining me this evening. Again, I hope you really enjoyed it. If you have any questions, I would love to answer them for you now. We'll ask our host to read out the questions. You can put them into the Q&A box or into the chat box, and we'll try to get through as many of them as we can.
All right, Lindsay, so you do have some questions here.
Yay.
One question is, can bears smell the food in my car?
Yeah, so bears most likely can smell the food through your vehicle. So having the windows rolled up would be a really good thing to do. Having a soft cover on your vehicle, like on convertibles, could be a bit of a danger to the bear breaking in through that. But ultimately the food and any of those items that have a scent are going to be much better protected inside your vehicle than they would be inside a tent or a trailer. And the likeliness of the bear being able to get into the vehicle is a lot less than the bear being able to get into a tent or a trailer. So that's why we always recommend keeping your food or anything else that has a scent, such as a barbecue or a cook stove, inside your vehicle.
All right, another question is, what are some good tips to make noise while hiking, and do bear bells work well?
All right. So tips for making noise while walking, take a small child with you. They will probably make more than enough noise. I know my kids will just talk nonstop. So even just being with another person while you're out on the trail and just having a conversation, maybe talking at a little bit of a louder volume than you normally would. Those are great things just to make noise on their own. Bear bells are a bit of a controversial item. Some people think that the sound that a bear bell makes, kind of that constant jingling noise, would be enough to deter bears or to let them know that you're in the area. However, bears are very curious animals, and when you have that repetitive jingling noise, that could actually draw a bear in, because if they've never encountered a noise like that before, they may be curious enough to come and investigate what it is. So bear bells can go either way. Personally, they're not my preference to use. I would rather just be out hiking on a trail with a group of people and having a loud conversation.
Another question is a very common question, I think, which is, some people's biggest fear is coming in between a mama and her cubs. So what would be the best way to handle this situation?
Yeah, so coming between a mom and her cubs, never something you want to be kind of in that situation of, but if it does occur, again, your best thing to do is to stay calm, really assess the situation. So figure out where the mom is, where the cubs are, and then try to back away so that you're not in between the two of them. And if that means you have to go off the trail and kind of push your way through the bushes or between the trees to get yourself out from being in between them, then that's what you have to do. So you just have to kind of get yourself as far away so that mom knows that she has access to her cubs and that you are not standing in between them. Again, you want to stay facing the bears so that you can see where they are and what they're doing. That's one of those instances where you would raise your arms above your head or your backpack or jacket up above your head, try to make yourself look big, talk to the bear as you're backing away so that she can hear you getting further away from her. Ultimately, the mom wants to be with her cubs. So as long as you are moving away from them, chances are that that encounter will go well and the mom will get to her cubs and leave you alone.
Another question somebody had is, Lindsay, have you been face to face with a bear yourself? And if so, what did you do?
Okay, so I have kind of a funny story. When I was, I think probably about 6 years old, we were out camping in Falcon Lake in the Whiteshell, which is where we camped kind of my whole childhood. And everyone in the campground started yelling that there was a bear out on the road. And my mom grabbed my hand and said, "Come on, let's go see the bear." And she'll probably be really embarrassed if she knows that I'm telling this story. And so we went to see the bear. My grandma, on the other hand, grabbed my brother and went inside the trailer. We never saw the bear. The bear ended up taking off through the campsites. And my grandma and my brother actually got to see the bear because it came right through our campsite and kind of paused there for a moment and then took off. So we really never got to see it, but that's always kind of my first memory of encountering a bear, even though I didn't actually see it. But I have been fairly close to bears out in the park and in natural spaces. And yeah, always it's a stop, assess the situation, back away down the trail, even if that means you have to put your trail walk on pause or you have to go a different route, making lots of noise so that the bear knows where you are and that you're moving away from them. But yeah, those are all kind of typical encounters that can happen if you do see a bear in the wild.
All right. Do you campgrounds see a lot of bear activity, or would the human activity scare them away more than a backcountry area?
Yeah, so in Birds Hill Provincial Park in particular, we typically don't see a lot of bears inside our campgrounds. Just the volume of people and noises and vehicles is enough to scare bears away from our campground. Last summer, we did have a bear kind of moving around Sage Bay in our overflow. And I believe that was the first documented bear in the Birds Hill campground that we've ever come across. But we do see bears near the campground. Again, just the amount of people and the amount of noise typically kind of scares them away. However, that is not to say that that is the same in all campgrounds around Manitoba. So Grand Beach Provincial Park does see a lot of bears in their campgrounds and in their cottage areas. I know in the Whiteshell, they also see a lot of bears come through their campgrounds. And so just to rely on human activity is not enough to know that bears will not come in. We should always be prepared for the fact that bears are in the area and could come into our campgrounds. And so we should always be prepared for that and be taking those necessary steps to ensure that they're not being attracted to food sources or to garbage. And that if they do come through our campgrounds, that they're not going to find any of those items available to them.
So Lindsay, this kind of brings up one of the other questions that's been here, that in Birds Hill, we do see bird feeders out. So is this allowed? Because somebody was asking, how come we do see bird feeders then in Birds Hill?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that question. So yes, we do see bird feeders in the park. A lot of park patrons like to put up bird feeders when they come out, particularly for the winter months. And we really try to discourage putting up bird feeders in the park. And as soon as the spring rolls around, if those bird feeders have not been removed, then we do go, as park staff, we do go and remove any bird feeders that we find. And we continue to remove bird feeders throughout the spring and summer months, just to really ensure that we are not attracting bears or any other wildlife to those areas where those bird feeders have been put up. So again, I can't stress enough, if you do have bird feeders, please keep them at your own homes and try to avoid having them out during the spring, summer, and fall months, because that really does cause a lot of issues for bears and for other wildlife.
So speaking of bird feeders, what about hummingbird feeders?
Yeah, another good question. So hummingbird feeders fall into the exact same category. And that's a really tough one, because I know we really like to put out hummingbird feeders and to see hummingbirds. That's such a kind of a unique, special thing when you get to see those animals. Again, if you want to put them out, please do it on your own property, but only in areas where you know bears are not active and are going to be drawn to a hummingbird feeder. If you've never put out a hummingbird feeder, you typically fill it with sugar water. And of course, that gives off a bit of an odor. It's sweet, it's sticky. Bears love sugar water. And so we really want to discourage putting out hummingbird feeders as well.
All right. Are cubs born in the den?
Yes, cubs are born in the den. And if you think about a human mom when she gives birth to a little one, baby does a lot of sleeping, and usually mom likes to try and do a lot of sleeping too. And so bears are very similar in that. After the cubs are born, they nurse from the mother and they will sleep. And the mom kind of just sleeps right alongside with them until they are ready to emerge later on in the spring.
What do you do if the bear doesn't leave because it can tell you are still breathing when you're playing dead?
So if the bear knows that you are no longer a threat, that's when it's likely going to leave. And so that's why the recommendation is not to get up and try to move or walk away if the bear is still in the area. It's not that the bear expects you to be dead and no longer breathing. It's more so that the bear doesn't want you to be a threat. And so again, that could be if there are cubs in the area or if it is feeding on something and it sees you as being a threat to its food source. But again, that type of encounter with the bear is very, very rare.
So let me just go through here. Somebody was asking about when you're in the backcountry, in regards to if there's no bear boxes, how would you, safely store your food or toiletries in the backcountry?
Yeah, great question. So there's a couple of different things you can do in backcountry camping situations. If there isn't one of those boxes on site, you can actually get bear-proof or wildlife-proof containers, and they're quite large. They're almost the size of kind of the backpack that you would use for carrying your equipment in while you're out in the backcountry. And the way that they seal is the lid is flat, and you have to use a screwdriver to screw the lids closed. And so by that means the bear isn't able to pry it open because unless they're going to get their nails in there like a screwdriver, they're not likely going to be able to get that lid off. So that's one option. You can invest into a bear-proof container to keep your items in. But the other option you can do, and I've done this when I've done backcountry camping, is we identify one pack as the pack to carry all the food and all the toiletries in, and then that pack becomes kind of our smell pack. And so that's the one that has anything smelly in it. And also when we're packing things out, any of our garbage goes into that pack. And then that pack at night, when we're settled in camp, use a long rope and you actually hoist it up into the branches of a really tall tree. You want it to be about 9 to 10 feet up off the ground and far enough away from the trunk that if a bear were to climb up the trunk, they wouldn't just be able to reach, the pack hanging off of the branch. So it does take a little bit of creativity to find the right type of tree when you're in camp. Some backcountry campsites will even have trees kind of designated or marked with a piece of flag tape as being an appropriate tree to use so that it's high enough and it has an appropriate branch to support the weight. And then you just need a rope that is, anywhere from 50 to 100 feet in length to be able to hoist that pack up, and then you tie it off around the tree. I've heard that a black rope is much better to use than a white one, just because it's darker in color, so it's harder for the bear to be able to actually see that rope coming down from the pack and being tied around the tree.
How does bear activity compare during the day versus at night?
Oh, another good question. So bears are, they can be active at all times of the day and night. If you think about our summers in Manitoba, when it gets really, really hot, a lot of wildlife tend to kind of hunker down, find a cool shaded spot, and they may sleep for several hours during the middle of the day just to avoid that heat of the sun and the humidity. And bears are very similar to that. They will often be less active during the daytime when it is hot and more active in the morning and at dusk, so kind of that dawn and dusk period. They may even be active for a few hours after sunset. And that's where we sometimes see bear activity kind of later at night in the summertime. So they can be awake and active at all times of the day and evening, but really around dawn and dusk is kind of when they are the most active.
Do you happen to know how long the different types of bears live, like the average lifespan of the bears that we have in Manitoba? I know it's a very question.
Sorry, say that last part?
I was just saying it's a very specific question on the age.
Yes, very specific. So compared to grizzlies or polar bears, I don't specifically know. But for black bears, you know, if it's a bear that is living somewhere where there are good food sources, natural food sources, where the bear is not becoming habituated, it's not being drawn into human areas, and just kind of living very naturally, those bears can live for anywhere from 5 to 8 years. If it's a bear that is, you know, kind of living in an area where there's a lot of human activity, it's getting drawn into garbage or other human food sources. Unfortunately, those types of bears have a lot shorter of lifespans, not only because they run the risk of becoming problem wildlife and possibly having to be euthanized, but also because human food sources and garbage are not really a good thing for bears' digestive systems. And so that can actually cause a lot of health issues for those bears. Sometimes bears that hang around garbage dumps, what we call a garbage bear, will have shorter lifespans too, just because they're eating all kinds of things like tin cans and batteries and, you know, anything that has a scent to it, but that ends up being really harmful to their health.
So just to kind of go back to the activity of bears, do you know when they tend to eat their meals, like what time of day they do, or is it kind of all day long?
Yeah, so in the spring and summer months, kind of when bears are most active, so that dawn and dusk period is when they're going to be doing the majority of their feeding. Once we get into the fall time and they reach that hyperphagia stage where they're just gorging themselves and eating nonstop, they will just continue to eat all day and as late into the night as they can. If they come across a food source and it is 11 o'clock at night, they're going to sit down and eat. That is when supper time is. So they will just eat constantly in the fall time. And they tend to sleep a little bit less in the fall and just eat all the time.
Right on, thank you. And the last question here is, do you happen to have any idea of the number of bears living in Birds Hill, or are there any bears near Beaudry Park as well?
All right, so Beaudry I don't specifically know about. For anyone that's unaware, Beaudry is just outside the city of Winnipeg, kind of on the west side outskirts of the city. So unfortunately, Beaudry area, I don't really know. In Birds Hill Park, we don't know of any bears that live in the park year round, or for as much of the year as they can. We have heard reports from some of our park patrons of possible bear dens in some parts of the park. Again, they are just kind of sightings, things that people have seen that may be a den. We don't have any confirmed evidence of that. And so we don't really know of any bears that are living in the park all the time. Birds Hill Park is relatively small compared to the surrounding areas. And so we do know that there's a lot of bears in the area and they tend to come in and out of the park. There's no fences around the park, and so there's nothing stopping them from walking in, finding food sources or finding a place to sleep, and then moving out and finding other food sources outside of the park. So we do definitely see bears in the area, but as to bears specifically in the park or living in the park, we often say that we don't really have a bear population in the park, just that they move in and out.
I believe that is all of the questions, Lindsay.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I really enjoyed answering all your questions. There were some really great ones in there. Again, please do visit the Manitoba Wildlife Smart website for more information on living in bear country and protecting yourself and your property and the bears when in the outdoors. And if you do come across any other questions, you can always contact us through the Manitoba Parks Interpretation email address. And thank you again so much for joining us. We hope you had a great time this evening, and we hope to see you again at our upcoming webinars this spring. Have a good evening, everyone.